Filthy old dealer like you doesn't get to play innocent. Officer Clay Briggs spat the words as he slapped Martha Ellison's pharmacy bag from her hands, prescription bottles scattering across the tile like contraband. His boot came down hard, grinding her arthritis medication until the label, her name, blurred beneath his heel. The sharp scent of his cologne mixed with the chemical sting of crushed pills, burning her nostrils as Doss yanked her arms higher, cuffs biting into fragile skin. "Look at her!" Briggs barked to the stunned customers, "pretending she's here to buy something." Martha steadied herself, silent, her cardigan slipping from one shoulder. And Briggs, drunk on power, had no idea the woman he was dragging away was the mother of a federal agent who could dismantle his world. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Martha Ellison's silver Buick eased into a parking space outside Greenwood Pharmacy, the same spot she'd used for 20 years. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cracked asphalt as she gathered her purse and prescription list. Her arthritic fingers fumbled with the door handle before she finally pushed it open. The familiar bell chimed as she entered the pharmacy, nodding to Mrs. Peterson behind the counter, who had been filling prescriptions there since Martha was still teaching 3rd grade. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a harsh glow on the neat rows of medicines and supplies. "Good morning, Mrs. Ellison," called Tommy, the young stock boy who'd been one of her last students before retirement. "Need any help today?" "No, thank you, dear," Martha replied with a warm smile. "Just picking up my usual." She made her way down the center aisle, her sensible shoes clicking softly against the linoleum. The arthritis in her hip was acting up again, making each step a careful consideration. Her shopping list was simple: arthritis medication, diabetic test strips, and maybe some of those compression stockings on sale. The bell chimed again. 2 police officers entered, their boots heavy on the floor. Officer Briggs strutted in first, his chest puffed out like a rooster's, while Officer Doss followed, his eyes darting around the store. Martha barely noticed them as she reached into her purse for her coupon envelope. The envelope was stuck between her wallet and checkbook. Martha adjusted her purse on her shoulder, carefully extracting the thick packet of carefully clipped coupons she'd organized by category. As she did, she felt eyes on her. Looking up, she caught Officer Briggs staring intently in her direction. Martha returned to her shopping, moving down the vitamin aisle. The officer's footsteps echoed behind her, never more than an aisle away. Every time she glanced over her shoulder, there they were, watching. The hair on the back of her neck stood up. At the pharmacy counter, Martha handed over her prescriptions to Mrs. Peterson. "How's little Sarah doing in school?" she asked, trying to maintain her usual friendly demeanor despite her growing unease. "Oh, she just made honor roll again," Mrs. Peterson beamed. "She still talks about having you as her teacher." Before Martha could respond, Officer Briggs appeared at her elbow. His badge caught the fluorescent light as he loomed over her. "Ma'am, I need you to empty your purse." Martha stiffened, her spine straightening the way it did when unruly students needed correcting. "I beg your pardon?" "Empty your purse, now." His tone was harsh, demanding. "I will do no such thing," Martha replied, her voice firm but quiet. "I've been coming to this pharmacy for decades. I don't appreciate being treated like a criminal." Other customers stopped to stare. Mrs. Peterson stood frozen behind the counter, prescription bag half extended. Officer Doss moved to Martha's other side, effectively boxing her in. "Last chance," Briggs growled. "Empty it yourself, or we'll do it for you." Martha clutched her purse closer. "I know my rights. You have no cause to search my belongings." Officer Doss's hand shot out, grabbing Martha's arm. His fingers dug into her flesh through her cardigan sleeve. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Take your hands off me." Martha's voice rose with indignation. Decades of commanding classroom respect rang in her tone. I am a retired teacher, not some common criminal. Tommy stepped forward from where he'd been stocking shelves. Officers, there must be some mistake. Mrs. Ellison is— Stay back, Briggs barked, causing the young man to flinch. Martha's heart pounded as she looked around at the familiar faces now watching in horror. Mrs. Peterson's hand covered her mouth. The young mother by the baby supplies held her phone up, recording. An elderly man using a walker shook his head in disgust. This is completely unnecessary, Martha stated, fighting to keep her voice steady. I've done nothing wrong. Briggs's face darkened. His hand clamped down on Martha's shoulder, spinning her around. Before she could protest further, he slammed her against the medical supplies shelf. Boxes of bandages and cold medicine clattered to the floor. Several customers gasped. Someone shouted, "Hey!" A child started crying. Martha's cheek pressed against the cold metal shelf as her arms were wrenched behind her back. You people never learn, Briggs muttered, his breath hot against her ear. Martha's hip screamed in pain where it was crushed against the shelf edge. Dignity warred with fear as she felt the cold metal of handcuffs against her wrists. All around her, the familiar pharmacy blurred as tears filled her eyes. The handcuffs clicked shut around Martha's wrists, cold metal biting into her skin. Pain shot through her hip, where the shelf's edge dug in mercilessly. "We've got a dealer here," Briggs announced loudly, his voice echoing through the stunned pharmacy. "Distribution of controlled substances." "That's ridiculous," Martha protested, her voice shaking. "I'm here for my arthritis medicine." Briggs yanked her away from the shelf, spinning her to face the horrified onlookers. "Yeah, that's what they all say. Down on the ground." "Please," Martha begged. "My hip, I can't." But Briggs was already forcing her down, his knee pressing into her back as Doss grabbed her legs. Martha's hip exploded with agony as they pushed her onto the cold linoleum floor. Her cheek pressed against the tiles, still sticky from morning mopping. "Someone help her!" Mrs. Peterson cried from behind the counter. "She's been my customer for 20 years. "Stay back," Doss warned, pointing at the gathering crowd. "This is police business." A young mother near the vitamin aisle held up her phone, recording the scene with trembling hands. "This is wrong," she said. "She's just an old lady." "Hand over that phone!" Doss stormed toward her, snatching it from her grasp. He spotted another customer filming and grabbed that phone too. "Evidence in an ongoing investigation." The young woman who'd been recording by the entrance quickly slipped her phone into her shoe before hurrying out the door. Martha watched her go, tears streaming down her face as Briggs roughly pulled her to her feet. "Let's go, Grandma," he sneered, half dragging her toward the exit. "Time for a trip downtown." Martha's legs could barely support her weight. Each step sent shooting pains through her hip as they marched her outside into the bright morning sun. Customers watched helplessly from the pharmacy windows as the officers shoved her into the back of their patrol car. "Dispatch, this is Unit 247, Briggs spoke into his radio, grinning. "We've got a major arrest here. Elderly female suspect caught distributing at Greenwood Pharmacy." The car's interior was suffocating, reeking of stale cigarettes and sweat. Martha sat rigidly upright, refusing to let her tears fall as they pulled away from the curb. Her wrists throbbed where the handcuffs cut into them. "Playing innocent won't help you," Doss said from the passenger seat. "We know all about your little operation." "Been dealing long?" Briggs asked mockingly. "Using that sweet old lady act to avoid suspicion?" Martha stared straight ahead, her mother's words echoing in her mind. "Hold your head high when they try to break you." She'd lived through segregation, through decades of subtle and overt racism. But this, being treated like a common criminal in her own neighborhood, cut deep. Not so chatty now, huh? Briggs laughed. That's okay. The evidence will do the talking. They pulled into the police station parking lot, the car bouncing over a pothole that sent fresh pain through Martha's hip. Briggs yanked open the back door, roughly pulling her out. Inside the station, a tall black woman in a sergeant's uniform looked up from the desk, her eyes narrowing as she took in Martha's disheveled appearance. "What's this about?" Sergeant Pierce demanded, coming around the desk. "Drug bust at Greenwood," Briggs reported smugly. "Caught her in the act." "Martha Ellison?" Pierce's eyebrows shot up. "The retired teacher? What evidence do you have?" "We received a tip about an elderly dealer," Doss explained. "Observed suspicious behavior with—" "Suspicious behavior?" Pierce cut him off. "This woman taught half the kids in this town. She volunteers at the library." "What exactly did you observe?" "She was concealing items in her purse," Briggs insisted, "making furtive movements." "My coupon envelope," Martha spoke up, her voice hoarse but dignified. "I was organizing my coupons." Pierce's jaw tightened as she looked at the handcuffs. "Remove those. Now." "But Sarge," Briggs protested. "Remove them." Pierce's voice cracked like a whip. Briggs reluctantly unlocked the cuffs. Martha brought her hands forward slowly, rubbing her raw wrists. "The evidence will speak for itself," Briggs muttered defensively. "Once we process her purse—" "Which you seized without probable cause," Pierce noted, her dark eyes flashing. "Mrs. Ellison, are you injured? Do you need medical attention?" "My hip," Martha admitted quietly. "When they pushed me down—" Pierce's expression hardened further. "Officers, wait in my office. Now." As they skulked away, she gently took Martha's arm. "Let's get you processed, Mrs. Ellison. I'm going to contact a supervisor about this situation immediately." Martha nodded wearily as Pierce guided her toward the intake area. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Call my son." "Of course," Pierce assured her, supporting Martha's weight as they walked. "We'll get this sorted out." The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, harsh and unforgiving, as Martha limped forward. Her carefully styled gray hair had come loose, her cardigan was wrinkled and dirty from the floor, but she kept her chin up. She'd taught generations of children to stand tall in the face of injustice. Now it was her turn to live that lesson. The afternoon sun slanted through barred windows, casting harsh shadows across the holding area. Martha sat on the hard wooden bench, her hands trembling, not from fear, but from the deep ache spreading through her body. Her hip throbbed where they'd forced her to the ground, and her wrists still bore angry red marks from the handcuffs. Down the hall, Sergeant Pierce stood in the break room, scrutinizing the hastily written arrest report. Her finger traced each inconsistency, each gap in their story. The anonymous tip had no source documentation. The suspicious behavior was vague at best. And the timeline, it didn't add up. "Officer Briggs," she called out, her voice stern. "A word?" Briggs swaggered in, followed by a nervous-looking Doss. "Something wrong, Sarge." "This report is full of holes," Pierce said, holding up the papers. "You claim you received the tip at 800, but dispatch has no record of it. Care to explain?" "Must be a clerical error," Briggs shrugged. "The tip came through proper channels." "Which channels exactly?" Pierce pressed. "Because I've called records, and they have nothing." Doss shifted uncomfortably, but Briggs just smirked. "Look, we caught her red-handed. The evidence—" "What evidence?" Pierce interrupted. "A coupon envelope? A prescription bag? You didn't even verify the contents before making the arrest." "We know what we saw," Briggs insisted, his face reddening. "And Chief Rollins backs us on this one." Pierce's eyes narrowed. Of course the chief was involved. She'd seen this pattern before. Trumped-up charges, missing documentation, pressure from above. "Get out," she ordered. "Both of you." Once they'd left, Pierce walked back to where Martha sat. The elderly woman's dignity was evident even now. Spine straight, chin lifted, though her hands still trembled. "Mrs. Ellison," Pierce said gently, "I need your emergency contact information. Is there someone I can call for you?" "My son," Martha replied softly. "Daniel Ellison." Pierce's pen froze mid-stroke. The name hit her like a thunderbolt. Daniel Ellison, the FBI agent who'd investigated their department 3 years ago, digging into civil rights violations until the case mysteriously went cold. She'd testified for him back then, watching helplessly as evidence disappeared and witnesses changed their stories. "I'll call him right away," Pierce promised, her mind racing. This wasn't coincidence. This was targeted. In Washington, D.C., Daniel Ellison stood before a tactical map, wrapping up a briefing on cartel movements along the border. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Another voicemail. He'd check it after. It buzzed again. And again. "Excuse me," he said to his team, stepping into the hallway. 3 voicemails from the same Greenwood number. His stomach tightened as he played the first one. "Agent Ellison, this is Sergeant LaDonna Pierce from Greenwood PD. Your mother, Martha Ellison, has been arrested on suspicious drug charges. Sir, I believe this is related to previous matters. Please call immediately." Daniel's jaw clenched. He remembered Pierce, one of the few honest cops he'd encountered during his corruption investigation. If she was calling, "Meeting's over," he announced, striding back into the room. "Jenkins, take point on the surveillance. I have a family emergency." He was already dialing Pierce's number as he rushed to his car. She answered on the first ring. "Agent Ellison, what happened to my mother?" His voice was controlled, but ice-cold. Pierce explained quickly. The pharmacy incident, the suspicious tip, the chief's involvement. They're holding her despite lack of evidence. Chief Rollins personally ordered it. Rollins. The name sparked memories of missing files, threatened witnesses, and a case that should have brought down half the department. How is she? She's hurting. They were rough during the arrest, but she's staying strong. Daniel's hands tightened on the steering wheel as he sped toward Reagan National Airport. Who made the arrest? Officers Briggs and Doss. New transfers, but their paperwork's irregular. Almost like they were handpicked. "Keep her safe, Sergeant," Daniel ordered. "I'm on my way. And Pierce, thank you for calling." "Just hurry," she replied softly. "Something's not right here." Daniel ended the call, his mind connecting the dots. 3 years ago, he'd nearly exposed a network of corruption centered around Chief Rollins. Kickbacks, racial profiling, evidence tampering. The case had been buried, but he'd always suspected Rollins knew who was responsible. Now this, an elderly black woman arrested on flimsy charges. His mother, targeted, humiliated, hurt. The message was clear. We haven't forgotten. Back in the station, Martha winced as she shifted on the bench. Her hip felt like it was on fire, but she refused to show weakness. She'd faced worse in her 74 years. Much worse. "Mrs. Ellison?" Pierce approached with 2 uniformed officers she didn't recognize. "I'm sorry, but they're moving you to a holding cell." Martha nodded slowly, using the bench's arm to push herself up. Each movement sent fresh waves of pain through her body. "My son?" she asked quietly. "He's on his way," Pierce assured her. "Try to rest if you can. I'll check on you soon." As they led her down the corridor, Martha thought of Daniel, her brilliant, determined boy who'd grown into a man of justice. She'd never told him she'd kept copies of his case files, hidden away for safekeeping. Something had warned her they might be needed again. The cell door clanged shut behind her. Martha sank onto the thin mattress, her thoughts turning to Daniel, already rushing home to fight for her. She closed her eyes, drawing strength from decades of surviving, of teaching others to stand tall. They'd picked the wrong woman to intimidate. They'd forgotten that sometimes the strongest steel is forged in the gentlest souls. Miles away, Daniel settled into his airplane seat, his jaw set with cold determination. The flight attendant announced their departure for Greenwood Regional Airport. 3 hours. Just 3 hours. And then, the fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sickly glow across the station's administrative area. Sergeant Pierce sat at her desk, methodically working through Martha's release paperwork. Her pen moved with purpose as she documented the glaring lack of probable cause. No evidence collected, no contraband found. Witness statements contradicting officer's account, she muttered, building an ironclad case for immediate release. The clock on the wall read 6:45 p.m. Most of the day shift had cleared out, leaving behind the quiet efficiency of night staff preparing for their rounds. Pierce glanced toward the holding cells, knowing Martha was alone, hurting, and separated from her medication. "Just a little longer, Mrs. Ellison," she whispered, signing the final form with a flourish. The relative peace shattered as Chief Rollins burst through the door, his heavy footsteps echoing down the hallway. He wore his usual pressed uniform-like armor, authority radiating from every polished button. "Pierce," he barked, "what's this I hear about release paperwork for the Ellison woman?" Pierce stood her ground, gesturing to the documented inconsistencies. "Sir, there's no probable cause to hold her. The arrest was improperly executed and—" "Improperly executed?" Rollins cut her off with a harsh laugh. "Officers Briggs and Doss conducted themselves exactly as trained. We received credible intelligence about prescription drug dealing. Chief, that intelligence isn't documented anywhere. I've checked every—" "Because it's part of an ongoing investigation," Rollins snapped. He snatched the release forms from her desk, tearing them in half. "Mrs. Ellison stays in custody pending narcotics analysis. That's an order." The night staff watched silently as Rollins stormed toward the break room where Briggs and Doss lounged. His voice carried clearly through the thin walls. "Outstanding work today, officers," he announced loudly. "This department supports proactive policing. You saw suspicious behavior, and you acted. That's exactly what we need." Pierce's hands clenched into fists as she watched Briggs preen under the praise. Doss at least had the decency to look uncomfortable, but he nodded along with his partner. "Thank you, Chief," Briggs replied smugly. "Just doing our job, keeping the streets clean." Pierce pulled out her phone, stepping into an empty interview room for privacy. Daniel needed to know about this development. He answered immediately. "I just landed," he said without preamble. "What's happened?" "Chief Rollins intervened personally," Pierce explained. "He's ordered your mother held overnight, claiming they're waiting on drug analysis. But Daniel," she lowered her voice further, "this feels coordinated. Briggs and Doss, they're not random transfers. Their personnel files are locked down tight, but I recognized Briggs's name from your old case notes." A long pause followed. When Daniel spoke again, his voice was cold steel. "The same network. They're all connected to what I was investigating 3 years ago. Yes, and they're using your mother to send a message. Keep watching her, Sergeant. I'm on my way." Across town, in a cramped apartment bedroom, 23-year-old Jasmine Taylor sat cross-legged on her friend's bed, staring at her phone. The video she'd captured at the pharmacy played silently. Martha's dignified resistance, the brutal takedown, the officers' sneering faces clearly visible. "You have to post it," her friend Angela urged. "People need to see this." Jasmine shook her head. "You saw what they did to those other witnesses. They'll come after me. Then send it anonymously to the news or something." But Jasmine remembered Officer Briggs's threat to another bystander. Recording police activity can be considered interference with an investigation. Think about your family. She tucked the phone away, hugging her knees to her chest. I need to think about it. Make sure I do this right. The holding cells were quiet now, most temporary detainees having been released or transferred. Martha lay on the thin mattress, one hand pressed against her aching hip. The bruise there felt hot and swollen, but she refused to complain. They wouldn't get the satisfaction. Instead, she prayed, not just for herself, but for Daniel, racing through the darkness toward her. For Sergeant Pierce, trying to do right in a corrupt system. Even for those young officers whose souls had been twisted by power and prejudice. Lord, give us strength, she whispered. Give us justice. The night staff made their rounds, footsteps echoing on concrete floors. Martha could hear other inmates shifting restlessly, some crying softly, others calling out for attention. She thought of her students over the years. How many had she taught to stand up against bullies, to believe in their own worth? Now she needed to live those same lessons. On the interstate, Daniel gripped his rental car's steering wheel, pushing the speed limit as much as he dared. Exit signs flickered past. 45 miles to Greenwood. The same road he'd driven 3 years ago, chasing corruption that ran deeper than anyone suspected. His mother's face filled his thoughts, her gentle strength, her unwavering moral compass. She'd raised him alone after his father died, working 2 jobs while earning her teaching degree. She'd taught him that justice wasn't just about laws. It was about standing up for what's right, no matter the cost. Now she was paying that cost, lying in a cell because corrupt men wanted to send him a message. His jaw clenched as another exit sign appeared. 40 miles to Greenwood. Hold on, Mom, he murmured. I'm coming. The fluorescent lights buzzed on, keeping their merciless vigil as night settled over the station. Martha adjusted her position carefully, trying to find relief from the constant ache. Through her cell window, she could see a sliver of stars. Somewhere out there, her son was coming. And with him, a reckoning these men never expected. Just before midnight, Daniel's rental car pulled into the dimly lit police station parking lot. The building's harsh fluorescent glow cast long shadows across the empty spaces. He killed the engine but remained seated, studying the entrance where, hours earlier, they'd dragged his mother inside. His phone buzzed, a text from Sergeant Pierce. South lot, behind the dumpsters. Daniel found her waiting in the shadows, her dark uniform blending with the night. Her face was drawn with concern as she glanced over her shoulder. We need to be quick, Pierce whispered. The cameras have blind spots here, but Rollins has eyes everywhere. Tell me everything, Daniel said, his voice tight with controlled anger. Pierce pulled out a folded paper. The anonymous tip that triggered this? It was specific. Too specific. They knew your mother would be at the pharmacy today. Knew what she'd be wearing. A blue cardigan and tan slacks. Knew she'd arrive in her silver 2015 Camry. Even knew which parking spot she usually takes. Daniel's jaw clenched. Only someone local would have those details. Exactly. And the tip came through internal channels, not the public line. Someone inside the department targeted her deliberately. Inside the station, Officers Briggs and Doss stood at the evidence processing counter. Briggs held up a small plastic bag containing white pills, a smirk playing across his face. Make sure this gets logged under the Ellison case, he told the sleepy-looking evidence clerk. Found during the initial search, of course. Doss shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing as Briggs dropped the planted evidence into the deposit drawer. What's wrong, Hunter? Briggs taunted. Getting soft on me? Remember what the chief said? We're cleaning up the streets. Yeah, Doss mumbled. Cleaning up the streets. Back in the parking lot, Daniel processed Pierce's information. I need to see the case documents, he said. The arrest report, the evidence log. Already tried, Pierce interrupted. Rollins has everything locked down tight. Says it's an active investigation, no access, without his direct approval. Which he won't give. Not a chance. But Pierce glanced around again before pulling a folded paper from her pocket. I made copies of the intake log before they restricted it. Look at the timestamps. Daniel studied the document under the dim parking lot lights. The evidence submission is logged before the actual arrest time? Pierce nodded. They're getting sloppy. Confident no one will challenge them. They've never dealt with me before, Daniel said grimly. Be careful, Pierce warned. These men, they're not just corrupt, they're desperate. And desperate men are dangerous. A car door slammed somewhere in the lot, making them both tense. Go, Pierce whispered. I'll keep watching your mother. Make sure she's safe. But Daniel? She gripped his arm. Whatever you do, don't let them know how much you know. Not yet. Daniel nodded and melted back into the shadows. Minutes later, his rental car pulled away from the station, heading toward his mother's house on Oak Street. The modest two-story home sat dark and silent, exactly as Martha had left it that morning. Daniel used his spare key, breathing in the familiar scent of lemon furniture polish and the lingering aroma of yesterday's Sunday dinner. He moved through the rooms like a ghost, noting the half-finished crossword puzzle on the kitchen table, the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, the family photos lining the walls. His mother's presence filled every corner, making her absence feel even more wrong. In the living room, Daniel stood before the mantel, staring at a photo of his mother surrounded by her last class of students before retirement. Their bright young faces beamed at the camera, adoring their teacher who had touched so many lives over her decades of service. His fists clenched as he imagined her now, lying on a hard jail cot, her hip aching from their rough handling. The same woman who had taught generations of children, who had raised him alone after losing her husband, who had never lost her faith in justice despite seeing so much injustice, now locked away on false charges by corrupt men drunk on power. The grandfather clock struck midnight, its deep chimes echoing through the empty house. Daniel moved to the window, looking out at the quiet street where neighbors slept, unaware of the corruption festering in their midst. How many others had these officers targeted? How many lives had they destroyed while Rollins protected them? The questions burned in his mind as he paced the familiar rooms, too wired to rest, despite knowing he needed to be sharp tomorrow. In his mother's bedroom, the bed was still neatly made, her reading glasses resting on the nightstand beside a well-worn Bible. A sticky note marked her place. Psalms 37:6. He will make your righteous reward shine like the dawn, your vindication like the noonday sun. Daniel touched the note gently, drawing strength from his mother's unwavering faith. He would need that strength in the coming days. Back in the living room, Daniel stood in the pool of streetlight streaming through the window. Dawn was still hours away, but already his mind was mapping out the investigation to come. He would need to move carefully, gathering evidence while staying under Rollins's radar. One wrong move could put his mother in even greater danger. The house creaked and settled around him, its familiar sounds both comforting and accusing. This was his mother's sanctuary, and they had violated it by targeting her. By tomorrow, they would learn exactly what that meant. Looking at the family photos one last time, Daniel made a silent vow. When the sun rose, the truth would begin its journey into the light. His mother had taught him that justice requires courage, patience, and an unwavering commitment to what's right. Now it was time to put those lessons into action. The first rays of sunlight crept over Greenwood's horizon as Daniel strode through the police station's front doors. The morning shift was just starting, officers shuffling in with coffee cups and tired eyes. At the front desk, Chief Rollins held court, his bulk filling the space as he gestured dramatically to a cluster of officers. "Quite a haul," Rollins announced loudly, clearly aware of Daniel's arrival. "Found these in Martha Ellison's purse during processing." He held up an evidence bag containing white pills. "Looks like someone's beloved teacher had a side business." Daniel's hands tightened into fists at his sides, but his face remained carefully neutral. He'd been trained to control his reactions, to never let targets see his true thoughts. Still, hearing his mother's name dragged through mud made his blood boil. "Those weren't there during her arrest," Daniel stated flatly. Rollins's smile didn't reach his eyes. Now, I understand you're upset about your mother, but evidence is evidence. We're upgrading the charges to distribution of controlled substances." Officer Doss lurked at the edge of the group, unable to meet Daniel's gaze. Briggs, however, stood proudly next to the chief, practically preening. "My mother has never touched illegal drugs in her life," Daniel said. "She keeps detailed records of every prescription, every receipt." "Save it for court," Rollins cut him off. "Maybe she fooled you too. Sometimes the ones closest to us have the darkest secrets." Daniel turned away, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. He knew arguing would get him nowhere. Instead, he headed to his car and drove to the pharmacy, where early morning customers were already trickling in. Inside, the fluorescent lights cast the same harsh glow as yesterday when they'd assaulted his mother. Daniel approached several customers, showing his FBI credentials discreetly. "I'd like to ask you about what happened here yesterday morning," he said to an elderly man examining vitamins. The man's eyes darted nervously to the front counter. "Didn't see nothing," he mumbled, hurrying away. A middle-aged woman was more direct. "Look," she whispered. "Those officers, they've done this before. Last month they roughed up Mr. Washington when he was picking up his heart medicine. Said his prescription looked suspicious. Nobody did anything because, well, you know how it is here. Did you witness what happened to Martha Ellison yesterday?" "Everyone knows Miss Martha," the woman said. "Taught half this town's kids. But those officers, they're protected. Speaking up just brings trouble." At the pharmacy counter, Daniel requested to view security footage from the previous day. The pharmacist, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, wrung his hands anxiously. "There was an unfortunate incident with our security system last night," he explained. "The hard drive seems to have been corrupted. We lost everything from the past 48 hours. "Corrupted how?" Daniel pressed. "I really couldn't say. These things happen sometimes." The pharmacist's eyes kept darting to the store's front windows. Outside, Daniel noticed a patrol car cruising past, Briggs at the wheel. The message was clear. They were watching. Back inside, Daniel approached more witnesses. Most hurried away or claimed they hadn't seen anything. But one young mother spoke up, voice trembling. "Those officers were wrong," she said quietly, loading diapers into her cart. "Miss Martha was just standing there with her coupons. They treated her like a criminal for no reason. But my friend Amy, she got footage on her phone. They took phones from 2 other people, but Amy hid hers. Can you put me in touch with Amy?" The woman hesitated. "She's scared. This morning, someone left a dead rat in her mailbox. Could have been random, but it probably wasn't," Daniel finished. Meanwhile, across town, local news stations were running with the story. "Beloved former teacher accused in drug investigation," the headlines declared. Social media exploded with shocked comments. Some defended Martha, but others wondered if there was truth to the accusations. "You never really know people," one comment read. "Maybe she needed money for retirement." "My kids were in her class," another posted. "Hard to believe, but why would the police lie?" Daniel's phone buzzed with a text from Sergeant Pierce. "Rollins feeding stories to media, painting her as sophisticated dealer using teacher reputation as cover. Some people buying it." His mother had spent decades building trust in this community. Now Rollins was trying to destroy that trust in a matter of hours. Back at the pharmacy, Daniel made one last attempt to recover evidence. The overnight cleaning crew reported seeing men in uniforms accessing the security room around 3 a.m. But without proof, it was just another dead end. Standing on the sidewalk outside, Daniel's fists clenched as he watched another patrol car roll by. They were systematically erasing any trace of what really happened. The security footage, witness phones, even public opinion, all being manipulated in real time. The morning sun now blazed overhead, but its warmth couldn't touch the cold fury building in his chest. His mother remained in a cell, while evidence vanished and lies spread. Each passing hour made the truth harder to prove. A young woman hurried past him into the pharmacy, her eyes down, shoulders hunched. Daniel recognized the defensive posture of someone carrying a secret, wondering if this might be Amy with her hidden phone footage. But before he could approach her, she disappeared into the aisles, clearly terrified of being noticed. Late morning sunlight filtered through the blinds in Sergeant Pierce's cramped office as Daniel settled into a chair across from her desk. The space felt like a closet compared to the chief's expansive quarters down the hall, a daily reminder of where power truly resided in this department. Pierce glanced at her closed door before pulling a thick folder from her bottom drawer. "I've been keeping records," she said quietly, spreading documents across her desk. Every complaint, every incident report involving Briggs and Doss, the official versions, and what really happened. Daniel leaned forward, scanning the pages. His stomach turned as he read report after report. An 68-year-old man arrested while picking up blood pressure medication. A 71-year-old woman detained for suspicious behavior while organizing her pill organizer in her car. All black residents. All cases mysteriously dropped after brief holds in jail. "They target seniors specifically," Pierce explained, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Older folks are less likely to fight back, more easily intimidated. And who's going to believe they're drug dealers? It's the perfect cover for harassment." She pulled out another file, this one marked with red tabs. "These are the disciplinary write-ups that never made it to official records. Complaints about racial profiling, excessive force, planted evidence, all buried by internal affairs." Daniel copied down addresses and names, his pen moving swiftly across his notepad. How many victims stayed quiet? "Most of them," Pierce sighed. "After what happened to the ones who spoke up?" She slid another paper across the desk. A list of accidents that befell complainants. Broken windows, vandalized cars, anonymous threats. The afternoon sun beat down as Daniel drove through Greenwood's neighborhoods, knocking on doors. At each home, he found similar stories waiting to be told. "They said they found pills in my husband's jacket," Mrs. Washington shared, her hands trembling as she poured tea. "But James never touched drugs in his life. They held him overnight, then suddenly dropped everything. But the damage was done. Rumors spread. People looked at us different." Mr. Turner, a retired postal worker, spoke from his porch rocking chair. "Officer Briggs threatened to tell everyone I was selling my heart medication if I didn't sign their statement. Said no one would believe my side anyway." Each victim's story added another piece to the puzzle. The pattern was clear. False arrests, planted evidence, charges dropped after brief jail stays. But why? What was the end game? At the local diner, Daniel overheard heated arguments about his mother's case. The afternoon edition of the Greenwood Gazette lay on several tables, its headline screaming, "Respected Teacher's Double Life. Sources reveal history of drug distribution." "It's all lies," an elderly woman insisted to her companion. "Martha Ellison helped raise half this town's children." "Then why would the police arrest her?" her friend countered. "There must be something to it." Daniel's phone buzzed with texts from community members sharing similar debates erupting across town. Neighbors who'd known Martha for decades now questioned everything. Rawlins's smear campaign was working exactly as intended. Back in his car, Daniel reviewed his notes. One detail kept surfacing. Many victims mentioned being pressured to enter a specific rehabilitation program, New Day Recovery Center, after their arrests. He pulled up the center's financial records on his laptop. The pieces started clicking together. The rehab center had expanded dramatically over the past 2 years, with occupancy rates soaring. Their biggest source of referrals? The Greenwood Police Department. And their board of directors included several familiar names, including one that made Daniel's blood run cold: Thomas Rawlins, the chief's brother. The sun was setting when Daniel finally returned to his mother's house. He cleared space on her dining room wall, pushing aside her collection of class photos from 30 years of teaching. One by one, he began pinning up documents, connecting them with red string. Photos of Briggs and Doss at multiple arrest scenes. Witness statements describing identical tactics. Financial records showing the rehab center's profits. Disciplinary reports that vanished from official records. In the center, he placed his mother's booking photo, the latest victim in their scheme. They target vulnerable seniors, he muttered, making notes on the timeline. Plant evidence, force them into expensive rehab programs, profit from the fear and silence. The wall told the story clearly now. A conspiracy of corruption, with his mother caught in its web. But proving it would require more than circumstantial connections. He needed hard evidence that would stand up in court. Daniel stepped back, studying the complex web of crimes and victims he'd mapped out. His mother's face stared back at him from the center of it all, dignified even in her booking photo, refusing to be broken by their cruelty. Outside, a police cruiser rolled past the house for the 3rd time that hour. They were watching, waiting for him to make a mistake. But Daniel had learned patience in his years with the FBI. He would build his case methodically, gathering evidence piece by piece until their whole corrupt system came crashing down. The dining room wall, once covered with happy memories of his mother's teaching career, now displayed the dark truth of Greenwood's justice system. Each document, each photo, each connection brought him one step closer to exposing their scheme and freeing his mother. As night fell, Daniel remained at the wall, adding notes and drawing new connections. The truth was there, hidden in the patterns. He just had to prove it before they could bury the evidence and his mother's reputation forever. The message arrived on Daniel's secure email at dawn. I have proof of what they did to Mrs. Ellison. Meet me at Oak Grove Park, 8 a.m. Come alone. Daniel arrived early, parking his car where he could observe all approaches to the small playground. The morning air felt crisp, carrying the scent of fresh-cut grass. A few joggers passed, paying him no attention as he waited on a worn wooden bench. At exactly 8, a young woman in a blue hoodie approached cautiously, glancing over her shoulder. She couldn't have been more than 25, with dark circles under her eyes suggesting sleepless nights. "Are you Daniel Ellison?" she asked softly, staying just out of arm's reach. He nodded, showing his FBI credentials. "Thank you for reaching out." "I'm Sophia," she said, sinking onto the far end of the bench. Her hands trembled as she pulled a phone from her pocket. "I was there when they arrested Mrs. Ellison. I've known her since I was a kid. She was my 4th grade teacher. When I saw what they were doing..." She unlocked the phone, pulling up a video file. "I hid my phone in my shoe when Officer Doss started grabbing people's devices. I couldn't just let them hurt her like that." Daniel watched the footage, his jaw clenching. The video was crystal clear, showing his mother calmly organizing coupons before Briggs and Doss approached aggressively. There was no probable cause, no suspicious behavior. just two officers targeting an elderly black woman, then violently shoving her against the shelves when she questioned their authority. "The sound is good, too," Sophia added quietly. "You can hear them taunting her, making those horrible accusations, and Mrs. Ellison staying so dignified through it all, even when they hurt her." Daniel immediately connected his laptop, creating multiple encrypted backups. "This is exactly what we needed," he said. "Would you be willing to provide a sworn statement about what you witnessed?" Sophia nodded, though fear flickered across her face. Mrs. Ellison spent 30 years helping kids in this town. Someone has to stand up for her now. By 9:30, Daniel had submitted the footage and Sophia's statement to Internal Affairs. The response was immediate. By 10, both Briggs and Doss were called in and placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Word spread quickly through Greenwood's tight-knit community. As Daniel drove to the station to check on his mother, he saw people gathering on the sidewalks, many carrying hastily made signs. "Justice for Martha Ellison," "Teachers deserve respect," "End police harassment," "Free Mrs. E." The crowd grew steadily, their voices rising in unified calls for Martha's release. Former students, parents, fellow teachers, faces from decades of Martha's service to the community joined together, demanding accountability. Inside the station, Daniel found Sergeant Pierce processing Martha's release paperwork, a satisfied smile playing at her lips. "Seems your evidence was pretty compelling," she said. "Chief Rollins is in damage control mode. The county commissioner's office is already asking questions." When Martha emerged from the holding area, she walked slowly but held her head high. Daniel gently supported her arm, noting how she winced from her bruised hip. But her eyes were clear and determined. "Thank you, LaDonna," she said softly to Pierce, "for being one of the good ones." The sergeant squeezed her hand. "I'm just sorry I couldn't stop this sooner." As they stepped outside, the crowd erupted in cheers. Martha blinked back tears at the sight of so many familiar faces. Students she'd taught decades ago, now grown with children of their own, all there to support her. "Mrs. Ellison!" Sophia pushed through the crowd, no longer hiding. "I'm so glad you're okay." Martha opened her arms, embracing the young woman. "My brave Sophia," she whispered. "I remember you always stood up for what was right, even in 4th grade." Sophia wiped her eyes. "You taught us that, Mrs. Ellison. You showed us what courage looks like." The drive home was quiet, Martha resting her head against the passenger window as familiar streets rolled by. Her house looked exactly as she'd left it Monday morning, her garden still waiting to be watered, her mail neatly collected by concerned neighbors. Daniel helped her inside, fixing her favorite tea and ensuring she took her medication. The ordeal had exhausted her, though she insisted on sitting in her kitchen for a while, reacquainting herself with the comfort of home. "I knew you'd come," she said softly, patting Daniel's hand. "When they put me in that cell, I just kept thinking, my boy will make this right." "They never should have touched you," Daniel replied, his voice tight with controlled anger. "But it's over now. You're home." As evening settled over Greenwood, Martha finally admitted she needed rest. Daniel helped her up the stairs to her bedroom, where fresh sheets and familiar pillows awaited. She changed into her comfortable nightgown while he adjusted her curtains and turned down the bed. "My good son," she murmured, as he tucked the blankets around her shoulders. "Always taking care of your mama." Daniel kissed her forehead, breathing in the familiar scent of her lavender soap. "Get some sleep, Mom. I'll be right downstairs if you need anything." Martha closed her eyes, settling into her own bed for the first time in 2 days. Outside her window, crickets chirped their evening song, a peaceful counterpoint to the tension and fear of the jail cell. She was home, she was safe, and justice was finally beginning to turn in her favor. Daniel sat at Martha's dining room table early Thursday morning, surrounded by stacks of documents. Steam rose from his coffee cup as he methodically organized the evidence against Briggs and Doss. The morning sun cast long shadows across his work, printed screenshots from Sophia's video, sworn statements from witnesses, and the disciplinary records Pierce had provided. He rubbed his tired eyes, checking his watch. 7:15 a.m. Martha was still sleeping upstairs, finally getting proper rest in her own bed. The sound of birds chirping outside provided a peaceful backdrop as he typed up the formal complaint. Officers Briggs and Doss demonstrated clear misconduct and excessive force in their unlawful arrest of Martha Ellison, age 74, he wrote, keeping his language precise and professional despite his personal involvement. Video evidence shows no probable cause for the initial confrontation. His phone buzzed. A text from Pierce. IA investigators arriving at 9. They want to review everything. Daniel spent the next hour refining his documentation, creating clear timelines that showed the pattern of abuse. He included statements from other elderly residents who'd faced similar profiling, their stories painting a disturbing picture of systematic harassment. At 8:30, he heard Martha's bedroom door open. "Daniel?" she called softly from upstairs. "Down here, Mom," he answered. "Can I bring you some breakfast?" "I'll come down," she said. "Need to get moving anyway." He listened to her slow progress on the stairs, noting how the injury to her hip had affected her normally steady gait. When she appeared in the dining room doorway, she was fully dressed in one of her neat teaching outfits, pressed slacks and a powder blue sweater. "You don't have to get dressed up, Mom," he said. "You should rest today." She shook her head, lowering herself carefully into a chair. "I won't let them make me hide in my nightgown. I have dignity." Daniel fixed her usual breakfast, toast with jam, scrambled eggs, and her morning pills. As she ate, he explained about the internal affairs meeting. "They're taking this very seriously," he assured her. "Sophia's video leaves no room for doubt about what happened." Martha nodded, spreading jam methodically on her toast. "Those officers need to learn they can't treat people this way. Not just for me, but for everyone they've hurt." At 9 a.m. sharp, 2 IA investigators arrived, Captain Reynolds and Lieutenant Torres. They set up laptops at the dining room table, reviewing Daniel's evidence with careful attention. "The video is particularly damning," Reynolds noted, replaying the footage. "Clear excessive force against an elderly civilian with no justification." Torres examined the disciplinary records, and this fits a documented pattern of behavior from both officers. Multiple complaints of profiling, excessive force, questionable arrests, all buried by department leadership, Daniel added. Until now. They spent 2 hours going through everything. Martha excused herself to rest in the living room, the formal questioning obviously tiring her despite her brave face. "This is compelling stuff," Reynolds finally said, closing his laptop. "We'll be launching a full investigation immediately. Officers Briggs and Doss will remain suspended, and we'll be looking very carefully at Chief Rollins's involvement." Daniel walked them to the door, relief washing over him. Finally, the wheels of justice were turning. Around noon, Pierce called with encouraging news. "Word spreading through the department," she said. "Several officers have approached me privately, saying they want to distance themselves from Briggs and Doss. They're worried about going down with them." "Good," Daniel replied. "Maybe some of them will come forward with what they know." Throughout the afternoon, neighbors stopped by with food, casseroles, soups, fresh bread. Mrs. Johnson from next door brought her famous chicken noodle soup. Tom Baker, whose daughter Martha had taught years ago, delivered a homemade lasagna. Each visitor expressed their support, their anger at what had happened, their relief that things were being made right. Martha insisted on sitting on the front porch to greet them, wrapped in a shawl against the cool spring air. Her presence seemed to reassure the community. She was home, She was healing. Justice was coming. "Look at all this food," she marveled, as Daniel stored containers in the fridge. "We won't have to cook for weeks." By evening, Daniel felt genuinely optimistic for the first time since Monday's arrest. He heated up Mrs. Johnson's soup, and he and Martha ate together at the kitchen table. "This reminds me of when you were little," Martha said, smiling over her bowl. "You'd sit right there doing homework while I made dinner. You always made sure I had good food and a quiet place to study," Daniel replied. "Now it's my turn to take care of you." After dinner, Daniel checked the fridge. "We're low on milk and bread," he said. "I should run to the store before they close. Will you be okay for a little while?" "Of course," Martha assured him. "Mrs. Johnson is right next door if I need anything, and I feel much better today." Daniel grabbed his keys, giving her a quick kiss on the cheek. "I won't be long, just going to grab a few basics." "Drive safely," she called as he headed for the door. The evening was pleasant, with a soft breeze carrying the scent of blooming dogwoods. Daniel climbed into his car, making a mental grocery list. After the tension of the past few days, a simple errand felt almost normal. He pulled out of the driveway, unaware that the fragile peace they'd achieved was about to shatter. Daniel pulled into his mother's driveway at 11 p.m., grocery bags rustling in the passenger seat. The house was dark except for the porch light. He grabbed the bags and headed for the door, looking forward to putting away the groceries and getting some sleep. His phone buzzed. Pierce's name flashed on the screen. "Daniel, they've reversed everything," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "The IA reviewer suddenly resigned an hour ago. Chief Rollins just declared the footage inadmissible." Daniel froze on the porch, keys in hand. "What? They can't do that. We have multiple copies, witnesses. They're claiming evidence tampering." Rollins issued a department-wide memo. "Briggs and Doss are being reinstated immediately." Headlights suddenly flooded the driveway. 3 police cruisers pulled up, lights flashing. Officers poured out, weapons drawn. "Pierce, they're here," Daniel said quickly. "At my mother's house." "Daniel, listen to me." Pierce's voice cut off as Officer Doss knocked the phone from Daniel's hand. "Federal agent," Daniel called out, reaching for his ID. "This is a private residence." "We have a warrant," Briggs announced smugly, waving a paper. "Step aside." More officers pushed past him into the house. Martha appeared at the top of the stairs in her nightgown, gripping the railing. "What's happening?" she asked, voice trembling. "Mom, stay upstairs." Daniel tried to reach her, but 2 officers blocked his path. "Mrs. Ellison, we need you to come downstairs," Briggs called up. "We're seizing evidence related to an ongoing investigation." "You have no right," Daniel began. "We have every right." Chief Rollins himself appeared in the doorway. "Your files are being seized as evidence of attempted obstruction of justice. And the charges against your mother have been upgraded to distribution of controlled substances." Officers were already ransacking the dining room, sweeping Daniel's carefully organized evidence into boxes. His laptop disappeared into an evidence bag. "Daniel?" Martha's voice was faint. He turned to see her swaying at the top of the stairs. "Mom!" He pushed past the officers as Martha's knees buckled. He caught her just before she hit the steps, easing her down. Her face was ashen, her breathing rapid and shallow. "I need an ambulance," he shouted. "She needs medical attention now." Rollins nodded to an officer, who radioed for EMS. Daniel cradled his mother, checking her pulse while chaos erupted around them. Officers continued their search, pulling apart closets and drawers. "You're going to answer for this," Daniel told Rollins, who stood watching with crossed arms. "Careful, Agent Ellison," Rollins replied. "Threats against law enforcement are taken very seriously." The ambulance arrived within minutes. As paramedics loaded Martha onto a stretcher, Daniel tried to gather her medication from the bathroom. An officer stopped him. "That's all evidence now," Briggs said, dropping the pill bottles into an evidence bag. "She needs those," Daniel protested. "She'll get proper medical care," Rollins said smoothly. "We wouldn't want any controlled substances leaving the premises." Daniel followed the stretcher out to the ambulance, arguing with officers in the driveway about Martha's prescriptions. Neighbors were emerging from their homes, drawn by the commotion. Mrs. Johnson stood on her porch in a bathrobe, hand over her mouth in shock. "You can ride with her," a paramedic told Daniel. "But we need to go now." Daniel climbed into the ambulance, gripping Martha's cold hand as they pulled away. Through the back windows, he could see officers carrying boxes of his files to their cruisers. At the hospital, Martha was rushed into the emergency room while Daniel paced the waiting area. His phone buzzed with messages from Pierce describing the sudden departmental reversal. The IA reviewer had submitted his resignation letter at 10 p.m., citing personal reasons. Within minutes, Rollins had declared the investigation compromised and ordered all evidence sealed. After what felt like hours, a doctor finally emerged. "Your mother is stable," she said, "but she experienced a severe anxiety attack that triggered concerning cardiac symptoms. Given her age and medical history, we'd like to keep her overnight for observation." Daniel nodded numbly. "Can I see her?" Martha lay small and pale in the hospital bed, an IV in her arm and monitors beeping steadily. Her eyes fluttered open as Daniel took her hand. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't apologize, Mom. None of this is your fault." "My pills. We'll get you new prescriptions first thing tomorrow," he assured her. "Try to rest." She drifted off, exhaustion finally overtaking her. Daniel sank into the bedside chair, his mind racing. The conspiracy reached deeper than he'd imagined. They'd been ready with warrants, with legal justification, with a coordinated plan to seize his evidence. Someone with serious influence was protecting this network. The steady beeping of Martha's heart monitor filled the quiet room. Daniel watched her sleep, seeing new lines of worry etched on her face. She'd spent her life teaching children, building community trust, earning respect. Now she lay in a hospital bed, her home ransacked, her reputation under attack, all because of corrupt officers who saw her as an easy target. A nurse came in to check Martha's vitals, adjusting the IV drip. Through the window, Daniel could see the first hints of dawn approaching. He hadn't slept, his anger building with each passing hour. The local authorities had shown their hand. They would destroy evidence, intimidate witnesses, and hurt innocent people to protect their power. But they'd underestimated how far Daniel would go to get justice for his mother. As Martha's monitors beeped steadily in the pre-dawn quiet, he made a silent promise. He would take this fight beyond their reach, to people they couldn't bully or bribe. Whatever it took, he would make them answer for what they'd done. Sunlight crept through the hospital room's thin curtains as Daniel shifted in the uncomfortable chair. He'd been there all night, dozing fitfully, watching the monitors track his mother's vital signs. Martha stirred, her eyes fluttering open as a nurse came in to check her morning readings. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Ellison?" the nurse asked, adjusting the blood pressure cuff. "A bit better," Martha replied softly. Her voice was weak but clear. The nurse recorded her vitals and left them alone. Daniel leaned forward, taking his mother's hand. "The doctor says you can probably go home today if your numbers stay stable." Martha squeezed his fingers. "Daniel, there's something I need to tell you." She paused, gathering strength. "Something I've kept hidden for years." "What is it, Mom?" "That case you worked on before they shut you down, when they made you leave town." Martha's eyes held a spark of determination. "I saved some things they tried to destroy." Daniel stiffened. "What things?" "A flash drive, with all the documents you gathered. The financial records, the emails, everything." Martha's voice grew stronger. "When they forced you out, when they were searching for evidence, I knew I had to protect it. Mom, those files were classified. If they'd caught you, I'm your mother, she said simply. I wasn't going to let them bury the truth. Not when I saw what it was doing to you. Daniel ran a hand through his disheveled hair. Where is it? At home. In my old biscuit tin, the one with the roses. Under the bottom panel. Martha described exactly where to find it. I kept it all these years, hoping someday. She trailed off, exhausted. Rest, Mom. I'll be back soon. Daniel kissed her forehead and hurried out. The morning was bright and cool as he drove to Martha's house. Yellow police tape still crossed the front door from last night's raid. Daniel ducked under it, noting the chaos inside. Drawers hanging open, papers scattered, furniture askew. He made his way to Martha's bedroom, where the antique dresser stood against the wall. The biscuit tin was exactly where she'd described, pushed to the back of the bottom drawer. Daniel's hands shook slightly as he pried up the false bottom. There, wrapped in tissue paper, lay a small flash drive. He sat heavily on the bed, staring at it. 5 years ago, he'd been building a case against corruption in the Greenwood Police Department. He'd uncovered concerning patterns, selective enforcement, evidence tampering, financial irregularities. But before he could complete the investigation, political pressure had forced the FBI to reassign him. All his evidence had supposedly been destroyed, except his mother, quiet and watchful, had saved the most damaging pieces. Daniel plugged the drive into his phone, heart pounding. File after file appeared, spreadsheets tracking suspicious payments, emails discussing quotas and target demographics, photos of officers meeting with private prison representatives. And there, in document after document, was Chief Rawlins's name, his signature, his fingerprints all over the corruption. The scope was staggering. The department had been systematically profiling and arresting vulnerable residents, particularly elderly black citizens, to feed a pipeline of profitable rehabilitation programs. Rawlins and his allies skimmed money at every step, from initial arrests to court fees to privatized probation. More damning still were the financial records, regular payments from shell companies tied to treatment centers, kickbacks disguised as consulting fees, a whole shadow economy built on destroying lives for profit. Combined with the pharmacy footage showing Martha's assault, plus the witness statements he'd gathered, it painted an undeniable picture. This wasn't just local corruption, it was a civil rights conspiracy spanning years. Daniel carefully secured the drive and headed back to his car. His phone buzzed. Sergeant Pierce. They're trying to transfer your mother's case to county court, she said without preamble. Rawlins is pushing for immediate arraignment. Let them try, Daniel replied. I'm about to take this so far above their heads they won't know what hit them. Be careful. Rawlins is calling in favors, trying to block any outside investigation. His influence doesn't reach where I'm going with this. Daniel started the car. Keep me posted on any moves they make. Will do. And Daniel, whatever you found, make it count. He drove back to the hospital, mind racing with next steps. The evidence on the drive gave him grounds to bypass local authorities completely. He could take this straight to the DOJ's Civil Rights Division, trigger a federal investigation that Rawlins couldn't stop. Martha was sitting up when he returned, looking stronger. A breakfast tray sat untouched beside her. Did you find it? She asked as he settled into the chair. Daniel patted his pocket where the drive rested. You kept all of it. Every document, every record. He took her hand. Mom, why didn't you tell me sooner? I was protecting you, she said. They'd already hurt your career once. I wanted to be sure it would make a difference. Her eyes met his. When they arrested me, when I saw those same officers still hurting people after all these years, I knew it was time. Daniel leaned close, keeping his voice low despite the empty room. Everything's about to change, he whispered. What you saved. It's exactly what we need. They can't hide from this anymore. Martha's fingers tightened around his. The morning sun streamed through the window, warming her face. For the first time since her arrest, she smiled. A small, fierce smile that reminded Daniel where he'd gotten his determination. The flash drive in his pocket held the key to dismantling years of corruption. His mother's quiet courage in preserving it would finally bring justice, not just for her, but for every victim of Greenwood's broken system. Daniel stepped into the sterile hospital hallway, his footsteps echoing against the linoleum floor. He walked past the nurse's station to a quiet corner near the emergency exit, where he could make a secure call without being overheard. The flash drive felt heavy in his pocket. 5 years of evidence about to shatter Greenwood's corrupt power structure. He dialed a number he'd memorized years ago, reserved for cases involving systemic civil rights violations. After 2 rings, a familiar voice answered. Special Agent Teresa Martinez. Martinez, it's Daniel Ellison. He kept his voice low, watching the hallway. I need the Civil Rights Division Task Force. It's about Greenwood. Ellison? The corruption case that got buried? Papers rustled on her end. What's changed? Everything. Daniel described Martha's arrest, the planted evidence, the pattern of targeting elderly black residents. And I have proof. Financial records, emails, documentation of the whole network. They're profiting from targeted arrests through kickbacks from private rehab facilities. Martinez's tone sharpened. Send me what you have. Now. Daniel pulled out his laptop, connecting through a secure hotspot. He uploaded the most damning files first. Spreadsheets tracking payments to Rollins, emails discussing arrest quotas by neighborhood, photos showing officers meeting with rehab center executives. Jesus, Martinez muttered, reviewing the documents. This goes deeper than before. The pharmacy footage, uploading now, shows clear civil rights violations. They assaulted my mother without cause, then planted evidence to justify it. More voices joined Martinez's line, senior DOJ officials reviewing the evidence in real time. Daniel heard fragments of their discussion. Clear conspiracy, systemic targeting, immediate intervention required. After 20 tense minutes, Martinez returned. We're authorizing federal action. A task force will move at dawn tomorrow. Keep this completely quiet. We need total surprise. Understood. Daniel glanced toward Martha's room. What about my mother's charges? They'll be dropped the moment we take control. Make sure she stays safe tonight. And Daniel? Well done preserving this evidence. You've given us everything we need. After ending the call, Daniel sent a secure message to Sergeant Pierce. Federal intervention coming. 0500 tomorrow. Prepare trusted officers only. Her reply was immediate. Copy. Will ensure cooperation from reliable personnel. Watch your back until then. Daniel returned to Martha's room, where she was picking at her lunch tray. The hospital had agreed to keep her overnight for observation, which now seemed like a blessing. She'd be safer here during the raid. Everything okay? She asked, noting his expression. Better than okay. He sat beside her, speaking softly. The Justice Department is moving in tomorrow. All those files you saved? They're exactly what was needed to prove the whole conspiracy. Martha set down her fork, eyes bright. They're really going to do something? A federal task force is coming at dawn. Rollins, Briggs, Doss, they won't know what hit them. He squeezed her hand. You won't have to worry about those charges anymore. It's over. Tears welled in Martha's eyes. All these years, watching them hurt people, feeling so helpless to stop it. You weren't helpless, Mom. You were smart, patient. You kept the truth safe until the right moment. A nurse entered to check Martha's vitals, interrupting their conversation. Daniel used the time to monitor secure messages from Pierce. She was quietly preparing a small group of trusted officers who'd help the federal team secure the station and prevent evidence destruction. Across town, unaware of the approaching storm, Chief Rollins sat in his office celebrating. He'd called in every favor, pulled every string to shut down the investigation into Martha's arrest. The pharmacy footage was buried, witnesses were scared silent, and that troublemaking FBI agent would soon crawl back to Washington with his tail between his legs. Rollins poured himself another drink, savoring his victory. He'd call the rehab center tomorrow, arrange another batch of referrals to keep the money flowing. The system he'd built was perfect, untouchable. Daniel spent the evening by Martha's bedside, watching the sun set through the hospital window. They talked about her former students, sharing memories of happier times. He made sure she ate dinner, took her evening medication, got comfortable for the night. "Try to rest," he said, adjusting her pillows. "Tomorrow will be a better day. I know it will." Martha's voice was tired but determined, because this time the truth is coming out. All of it. As darkness fell, Daniel's phone buzzed with a secure message from the DOJ task force. Teams en route at 0500. The federal vehicles moved like shadows through Greenwood's empty streets. Headlights off, engines hushed. Black SUVs and tactical vans positioned themselves around the police station with practiced precision. The morning air was crisp, still dark enough to mask their approach. Special Agent Martinez stood beside an armored vehicle, checking her watch. 4:59, she whispered into her radio. "All teams in position?" Confirmations crackled back from every entry point. Inside the station, Sergeant Pierce had ensured the overnight shift consisted only of officers she trusted. They'd been quietly briefed and knew to stand down when the raid began. At exactly 5 a.m., Martinez gave the signal. "Execute!" Teams breached every entrance simultaneously. The front doors burst open as agents flooded the building, weapons ready, shouting clear commands. The few officers on duty immediately raised their hands, following Pierce's instructions from earlier. "Federal agents! Everyone on the ground!" The dispatch officer froze, hand hovering over the radio. An agent quickly secured the communication system, ensuring no one could warn the targets. Martinez led the team heading for the locker room, where Briggs and Doss had just arrived for their early shift. The door crashed open, catching them mid-change into their uniforms. "Don't move! Hands where we can see them!" Briggs stood shirtless, reaching for his weapon. An agent tackled him before he could grab it, driving him face-first into the cold tiles. "What the hell is this?" he snarled, struggling as they cuffed him. Doss didn't resist, his face draining of color as agents secured his hands behind his back. The confidence that came from Rollins' protection evaporated in seconds. Martinez read their charges clearly, her voice echoing off the metal lockers. "Officers Clay Briggs and Hunter Doss, you're under arrest for civil rights violations, conspiracy, evidence tampering, false imprisonment." The list continued as agents hauled them to their feet. Both men were still half-dressed, their uniforms hanging open, badges clattering to the floor. The same badges they'd abused to terrorize innocent people now lay abandoned, stripped of their false authority. Across town, another team surrounded Chief Rollins's house. They watched through thermal imaging as a figure inside suddenly began moving rapidly. Rollins had been tipped off by his home security system. He burst through his back door in rumpled pajamas, clutching a briefcase. 3 agents emerged from the shadows, weapons trained. "Freeze! Federal agents!" Rollins skidded to a stop, the briefcase tumbling from his grip. Papers scattered across his wet lawn, financial records he'd tried to destroy. An agent grabbed his arms, forcing him to his knees in the dewy grass. "Chief Thomas Rollins," the lead agent declared, "you're under arrest for conspiracy, corruption, obstruction of justice." Back at the station, Pierce calmly directed federal agents to filing cabinets and computer systems containing years of evidence. Officers who'd stayed silent out of fear began stepping forward, describing how Rollins had forced them to participate in his schemes. "He made us target specific neighborhoods," one young officer explained, voice shaking. "Said if we didn't meet his quotas, we'd lose our jobs or worse." The sun rose over Greenwood to find news vans already gathering. Local stations broke into regular programming with live coverage. Helicopter footage showed federal vehicles surrounding the police station. Reporters rushed to set up cameras as agents led out the first prisoners. Briggs and Doss emerged into harsh morning light, now fully dressed but shackled. They kept their heads down as cameras flashed, capturing their walk of shame. The officers who'd acted so powerful while assaulting Martha now looked small, diminished. Minutes later, Rollins appeared in the back of a federal vehicle. He'd been allowed to dress, but his usual polished appearance was gone. His face was ashen as he realized his carefully built empire was crumbling in real time. Inside Martha's hospital room, Daniel stood by the window, watching the live coverage on a wall-mounted TV. Martha sat up in bed, gripping his hand tightly as they witnessed justice unfolding. After years of alleged corruption, the reporter announced, federal agents have arrested multiple Greenwood police officers on civil rights charges. Sources say the investigation uncovered systematic targeting of elderly black residents. Tears rolled down Martha's cheeks as she watched Rollins being led into the federal courthouse. "All those people he hurt," she whispered. "All those families. They'll have their day in court now," Daniel assured her, squeezing her hand. "Every victim will be heard." The TV showed Pierce speaking briefly to reporters, her demeanor professional but satisfied. "The Greenwood Police Department will cooperate fully with federal authorities. Our mission is to protect and serve all citizens equally." That trust was broken, but today we begin rebuilding it. More officers were coming forward by the minute, providing statements about Rollins's kickback scheme with the rehab center. The conspiracy was unraveling faster than anyone expected, each revelation leading to new charges. Martha wiped her eyes, watching the coverage with a mix of relief and vindication. "I never thought I'd see this day," she said softly. "When they arrested me, I felt so powerless. But now—" "You were never powerless," Daniel replied. "You were stronger than all of them. You kept the truth safe until it could do the most good." They watched together as federal agents carried box after box of evidence from the station. Decades of corruption exposed to daylight at last. The newscrawler announced that Martha's charges had been dropped, along with dozens of other cases tainted by the conspiracy. Outside the hospital window, Greenwood was waking up to a transformed reality. The power structure that had seemed untouchable just days ago now lay in ruins, its architects led away in chains before a watching world. The afternoon sun warmed Martha's face as Daniel wheeled her out of the hospital's main entrance. Her bruises were fading, but the emotional scars would take longer to heal. Still, there was a new strength in her posture, the quiet dignity of someone who had faced injustice and emerged victorious. "The community center?" she asked as Daniel helped her into his car, noticing their direction. "Just for a little while," he smiled, carefully securing her seatbelt. "Some people want to see you." As they pulled into the parking lot, Martha's eyes widened. Cars filled every space, spilling onto the grass. People stood in clusters outside the entrance, many holding homemade signs. "Welcome home, Mrs. Ellison," read one. "Justice prevails," declared another. "Daniel, what is all this?" "This is Greenwood showing its true heart, Mom." He helped her into the wheelchair, and as they approached the entrance, the crowd parted respectfully. Inside, the community center's main hall was packed. Familiar faces from decades of teaching filled the rows. Former students, parents, colleagues. They rose as one when Martha entered, applause thundering off the walls. Sergeant Pierce stood near the podium, now wearing a temporary chief's badge. She'd been appointed to lead the department's restructuring. Behind her sat several DOJ officials and community leaders. A distinguished woman in a federal prosecutor's suit approached the microphone. "Good afternoon. I'm Catherine Walsh from the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. We're here today not just to celebrate justice being served, but to apologize for how long it took." She turned to face Martha directly. "Mrs. Ellison, what happened to you was an unconscionable abuse of power. Your dignity in the face of such treatment has inspired changes that will protect countless others. On behalf of the federal government, I formally apologize for the trauma you endured." Martha nodded graciously, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue as Walsh continued. "Today, we're announcing the creation of the Senior Citizens Protection Initiative, a federal oversight program ensuring law enforcement accountability in cases involving elderly citizens. Additionally, Mrs. Ellison will receive a settlement of $500,000 in recognition of her ordeal." More applause filled the room. Martha gripped Daniel's hand, overwhelmed by the moment. Walsh gestured to someone in the crowd. "We'd also like to recognize another hero in this story." The young woman who had filmed the arrest stood nervously. Martha immediately wheeled herself forward to embrace her. "Amy Martinez showed tremendous courage," Walsh explained. "Without her quick thinking and bravery in preserving that footage, this case might have ended very differently. Ms. Martinez, the DOJ would like to present you with our Civilian Justice Award." Amy accepted the plaque with trembling hands. "I just did what Mrs. Ellison taught me in 3rd grade," she said softly into the microphone. "Stand up for what's right, even when you're scared." Fresh tears spilled down Martha's cheeks as her former student hugged her again. Pierce took the podium next. "The Greenwood Police Department is undergoing a complete restructuring. We've already implemented new training protocols, established a citizen oversight committee, and created mandatory reporting procedures for any use of force against elderly or vulnerable residents." She paused, her voice growing firmer. "The old guard is gone. Officers who stayed silent out of fear are coming forward. We're building something new, a department worthy of this community's trust." A DOJ deputy director approached Daniel. "Agent Ellison, your work here has been remarkable. We'd like you to head our new Elder Justice Task Force. Your experience and dedication make you the perfect choice to lead this initiative nationally." Daniel looked at his mother, who nodded encouragingly. "I'd be honored," he replied. Community leaders took turns outlining other reforms: body cameras for all officers, regular civil rights audits, new diversity requirements for hiring. Each announcement drew appreciative murmurs from the crowd. Martha's former teaching colleagues presented her with a plaque naming the high school's Community Service Award in her honor. "Every year," her old principal explained, "a student who demonstrates extraordinary moral courage will receive the Martha Ellison Stand for Justice Award." The formal ceremony gradually shifted into a community celebration. People lined up to hug Martha, share stories, offer support. Elderly residents who'd faced similar profiling but had been afraid to speak up now gave their statements to DOJ officials, knowing they'd finally be heard. Pierce approached Martha privately during the reception. "The pharmacy has a surprise for you," she said. "They've dedicated their consultation area as the Martha Ellison Community Corner. It's a safe space where seniors can get help with prescriptions and resources without fear." After several hours, Martha was visibly tiring, though her spirit remained bright. Daniel began wheeling her toward the exit, but well-wishers kept stopping them to express their support. "Let's get you home, Mom," he said gently, noticing her fatigue. The drive home was quiet, both of them processing the day's emotions. As they turned onto Martha's street, she gasped softly. Every porch light was on, and dozens of neighbors stood in her front yard. Daniel helped her up the walkway as people called out warm greetings. Inside, her kitchen had been transformed. The counters overflowed with casseroles, fresh fruit, baked goods, enough food to feed her for weeks. Get well cards and flowers covered every surface. Her next-door neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, stepped forward. "We've arranged a schedule," she explained. "Someone will check on you every day until you're back to full strength. We take care of our own here in Greenwood, the right way." Martha sank into her favorite armchair, surrounded by tangible proof of her community's love. The cards before her carried messages of support, apology, and determination to build a better town. Through her window, she could see children playing freely on the sidewalk, no longer fearful of police cars passing by. Daniel watched his mother's eyes grow heavy with grateful exhaustion. The day's events had demonstrated what he'd always known, that justice, while sometimes delayed, was unstoppable when good people stood together. His mother's courage had transformed not just their town, but would soon protect vulnerable seniors across the country. Sunday morning sunlight streamed through Martha's kitchen window, casting a warm glow across her worn wooden table. She stood at the counter, her movements deliberate as she prepared her morning tea. The familiar ritual felt different now, more peaceful, more assured. Daniel sat at the table, scanning news headlines on his tablet. "The federal investigation has already uncovered connections to 3 other precincts," he said. "Rawlins's network was bigger than anyone imagined." Martha nodded, bringing 2 steaming mugs to the table. All those years of hurting people, thinking they could get away with it forever. She wrapped her hands around her cup, drawing comfort from its warmth. "Sometimes the longest roads lead to the most important destinations." "Speaking of roads," Daniel said carefully, "how do you feel about heading to the pharmacy today?" Martha's hands tightened slightly on her mug, but her voice remained steady. "It's time. I won't let fear keep me from living my life. I'll be right beside you," Daniel assured her. They drove the familiar route to Greenwood Pharmacy, Martha sitting straighter as they approached. The building looked different somehow, less threatening, more like the community fixture it was meant to be. As they parked, Martha noticed new security cameras had been installed, part of the town's reforms. "Good," she murmured. "No more lost footage." The automatic doors slid open with their familiar chime. The same sound that had once marked the beginning of her nightmare now welcomed her into a transformed space. The store manager, Mr. Peterson, hurried forward immediately. "Mrs. Ellison," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I can't express how deeply sorry we are for what happened here. We failed you that day, but we're committed to making this right." Martha accepted his words with grace. "Thank you, Thomas. We all have a part in building a better community." He gestured toward the consultation area. "We'd like to show you something." Where there had once been stark white walls and utilitarian shelving, a warm corner had been created. Photos spanning decades showed Martha in her classroom, at community events, and receiving teaching awards. Newspaper clippings highlighted her achievements. Teacher of the Year, Community Leadership Award, 40 years of service to Greenwood youth. A plaque mounted prominently read, "The Martha Ellison Community Corner, where dignity, respect, and service meet. Dedicated to a woman who taught us all how to stand tall." Martha's eyes misted as she read messages posted by former students and community members. "Mrs. E taught me more than math. She taught me courage. Your classroom was the first place I felt truly seen. 3 generations of my family learned integrity from you." Current pharmacy staff had gathered nearby, many of them former students themselves. A young pharmacist stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "I was here that day," she admitted. "I was too scared to speak up. I'll carry that shame forever. But I promise you, nothing like that will ever happen here again." Martha hugged her gently. We learn. We grow. We do better. That's all anyone can ask. As they moved through the store, other customers smiled and nodded respectfully. Where once there had been hostile officers watching her every move, now there was only the normal bustle of Sunday morning shoppers. Daniel watched his mother carefully, ready to support her if the memories became too much. But Martha moved with quiet confidence, her head high as she selected her items. She paused in the aisle where she'd been assaulted, touching a shelf briefly. You know, she said softly to Daniel, standing here now, I feel sorry for them. Who, Mom? Rollins, Briggs, Doss, all of them. They were so small inside, so afraid of losing their power, they forgot how to be human. She straightened a few items on the shelf. Teaching taught me that bullies are always the most frightened people in the room. At the checkout counter, the clerk refused to let Martha pay. Your money's no good here anymore, Mrs. Ellison. Store policy. Daniel's phone buzzed as they finished bagging their items. He stepped aside to take the call, returning with a satisfied expression. That was the DOJ task force. They've traced all of Rollins' connections to the private prison industry. The whole network is falling apart. 17 arrests across 3 states so far. Martha nodded, unsurprised. Light always finds its way through the cracks. As they prepared to leave, Mr. Peterson approached again. Mrs. Ellison, we're starting a senior outreach program, helping older residents understand their medications, navigate insurance, access resources. Would you consider serving on our advisory board? We need voices like yours. I'd be honored, Martha replied. Every step forward matters. They walked toward the exit, Martha's arm linked comfortably through Daniel's. The automatic doors slid open with their musical chime. The same sound that had marked the beginning of her ordeal now signaled a new chapter. Young Amy Martinez was entering as they left. She beamed at Martha, proudly wearing her DOJ Civilian Justice Award pin. Good morning, Mrs. Ellison. I'm starting my shift at the community corner today. Then it's in good hands, Martha smiled. Keep standing tall, Amy. They stepped out into the bright Sunday morning, the door chiming behind them. Where police cruisers had once loomed menacingly, families now walked freely on the sidewalks. The air itself felt lighter, cleaner somehow, as if the whole town could finally breathe again. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.